Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete. And I am super excited to present to you somebody that I've worked with for a very long time, and I is highly respected by me as an amazing practitioner in the field, Maureen Shea. Maureen, welcome.
Hey, Julie and Pete. Great to see you.
Yeah, welcome. Great to have you.
Yeah, so Maureen, I think you and I met at CVS, actually, probably almost 15 years ago, maybe longer than that, and have kept in touch since then. And so I think you know enough to know that I usually ask, how the heck did you even get into HR?
Yeah, and unlike a lot of your other great, phenomenal panelists, I actually thought I had a phenomenal professor in college who loved what she did, and she was an HR professor, and whoever knew that existed. At the time, though, I thought I wanted PR, and I thought HR and PR were similar, but it was just she so loved what she did. It just really stuck with me. But upon reflection, it actually is pretty similar, right? It's about people, it's about engagement, it's about behavior change. So it's really kind of cool how those things align. But so after college, went off and worked for a bank in an HR department, as life would have it, and had the opportunity to work for, throughout my career, people who loved what they did and who loved people who wanted to learn and do what they were doing. So I just, I got started off as administrative assistant actually at a bank, and the head of comp and Ben said, "Hey, I got too much time. I got too much work to do. Let me send you off to the ACA to get certified, and you'll start doing comp and ben work." And it was just great to be a sponge and continue along in that way. So that's what got me in. What got me staying is just the great work. It's ever changing, right? It's comp, it's ben, it's people, technology, people, process, and technology. I've always been there, right? But all of those things change all the time, and just the impact the people and the processes and the technology have on the business and business outcomes. It's just, I'm a geek and I love it. It's just super
cool.
Isn't that funny? If it's not payroll that sucks you in and gets its tentacles into you, it's usually something really hairy, like benefits.
Yeah.
Benefits or compensation. So
yeah, and the complexity of that. I think a lot of people are drawn to the complexity of both of those worlds, right? It is never changing, even though it is kind of the same. But yeah, and so important, right? I mean, I feel like it's at least in America, it's sort of the fiber of like connecting your personal world to your, aside from pay anyway, right? Connecting your personal world and your work world. And maybe that's something we could talk about. Like, should we be untethering benefits from employment? But it's so woven, right, between each other.
And very relatable, right? Everyone has questions and health.
It touches your family.
And people are scared. It's something they don't know about. And then when they need it, it's a moment that matters, right? They need it then, they need it now, they're looking for help. And we're not always great at making that experience as employers, an easy one for them. So just great to be able to kind of help people.
Yeah. It's tricky, man. I always had to go to. My wife was a more benefits expert than maybe some things, and in terms of HR, she's a practitioner. So I always go to her for like. I'm like, what do I? I mean, I know benefits pretty well, but I always have her break some things down, more. And so I'm blessed to have that expertise for sure.
Another scary area,
yeah. It is. Yeah, it's a big decision.
I don't usually do the actual intro part. That's oftentimes Pete. So I think I shortchanged a little bit. Like I've known you in some of your roles at CVS. And can you just tell us a little bit about that? It's an enormous organization, top 5, I think, Fortune 5, Fortune 10. Just share a little bit about that, because it's been it's a big organization and you can do so many things in there.
It is. And we actually met and we were both vendors, because I was, for 22 years, I was with Alight, Aon Hewitt, all the different logos we had there. And just fascinating to be able to serve clients. It's build relationships. If you ever told me I was in a sales role, I would have run screaming. I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as building relationships, solving problems, and working with clients for those outcomes. And it was kind of great to see it from the outside in. But then, and that's where I'd met you. And then you're always trying to tap into the marketplace and get best practices. And it's just phenomenal where those relationships lead to, right? The world's small. And our world gets really small really fast. But then I had the opportunity. So after 22 years of serving phenomenal clients in the Northeast, always like the big, the bad, the complex, which sometimes the smaller ones, smaller companies have less resources and less time to devote. But so it's been fascinating and great. But it all goes down to delivering really well, and building those relationships and solving problems. And oh my God, even measuring the outcomes from time to time. But had the opportunity about 6 years ago. CVS and Aetna were clients of mine, and they, with their integration, which was vast and huge, they were doing a lot of reorging, and there was a box on an org chart, and I asked about it. I said, "What's that about?" And they said, "Well, we think you'd be great at it." And I started off, and I was like, "Ooh, wait a minute." I always think one makes you a better other. Two, if you're a comp person and you know Ben, payroll person who knows finance or tax or even benefits, different things. And to even, you might find out you love it. You might find out you learned a lot and it's not what you like, but I always think one makes you a better other. So being on the client side was really great, again, to get back to roots. And vendor management side's always a funny space too, right? It's the who wants to do contracts, right? Our COEs always want to be out doing the next best thing, talent, comp, Ben, and who wants to do the contracts? Who wants to monitor? Who wants to make sure the vendors that have their KPIs and performance guarantees in place, et cetera. And to me, that's just a really cool space, because if you don't understand the foundation, you don't understand, you can always get pokey at a vendor for not delivering on what they were supposed to, but were they supposed to?
You're a governance geek, Maureen.
Yeah. So love that. But then also at the time we were taking 14 disparate systems, doing the integration with Aetna, and going to one, we were at the end of life for one of our HCM, and we're going to take all 14 of them and put them in one. And everyone always complains about the systems they have until they're about to lose the systems they have, and they want them all back. But phenomenal, huge organization, to your point, Julie, but always very dynamic, always something to do, always leaning in and figure that out. So had that great opportunity to work with the team on that. Was one of the negotiated the HCM contract with some external support as well, because you always want best in market, and then implementing that kind of change. And it's never a great time for that change, right? And then when you have that opportunity and you have the paper and the pen, how do you look at that employee experience to truly improve it and not just lift and shift it?
Well, look, I'm super excited, Maureen, to have you talk with us today about the end-to-end mindset. It's something that when Pete and I did our annual, beginning of the year, what do we think are kind of hot topics or hot themes for
where to
each year?
focus? Yeah.
Yep, where to focus, where to focus. That to me is something that I'm seeing more and more often, and is one that we brought to the table at that point in time. And here we are, end of April, moving into May, and it just felt like, wow, we haven't really talked about this much. And you're such a perfect person to talk to, because you have such a variety of experience. And so I think just even starting with the idea of the end-to-end mindset, I think when we call that out as a theme, that's going to mean something different to everyone, just based on what role they're in, or what their lens or lenses have been in the organization. What does it mean to you? What do you think about, when I said, hey, let's talk about the end-to-end mindset today?
Yeah, beating my head against a brick wall from time to time, but you've hit all the reasons why. What does end-to-end mean, right? My end, my job, my silo. I look at it as pre-hire, the candidate experience, all the way through leaving the organization. Whether that's because I'm an entity of one. I'm an end, right? I don't think about myself in different cycles or different systems or different departments. I'm me as an employee, right? So look at it from the employee side, which is hard, right? Often we try to make it easy for the administrator, or you don't always appreciate the difficulties that come into that. But we have policies that drive it. And then when you have that opportunity to make that change, do you take it? You never have enough time. Do you go back and have all the documented SOPs? And what do you think? And then you've got people and tons of institutional knowledge in seats, often trying to design for the future, and they don't always understand the full There's resistance, right? Change is hard. You go first. And then there's sometimes not knowledge of what is possible, right? So one of our views, and I think it's a bugaboo for most employers, is onboarding. Who owns it? Where are the silos? Where does it happen? It's me, right? Or we get into working with our TA partners where it's the candidate's experience is different than the employee experience. Wait a minute, I've had to input my data 4 different times. and I don't have
Yeah.
the job yet, right? Or so to me, end to end is truly candidate through retirement and alumni, and maybe dot
Yeah.
dot dot.
This is a great timing for that sort of this conversation too, because like right now you're talking about like, rethinking and reinventing, right? Like now more than ever, AI, this is the chance to just wipe the slate clean and say, what do we want this to be? I think it's HR's big reset button, right? And the chance to have the moment to stop saying, well, this is the way we've always done it, so we have to, cram it into this box. Whereas now with AI, it's like, paint the picture you want, right? Like it's endless. There's endless opportunities here.
And not everyone should have a paintbrush. We should.
Yeah. That's the next level.
But it is fascinating. And sometimes, people get overwhelmed with the, what's the end-to-end mindset? And it can start in little ways. Why do we do this? Do we need to do this? One of the guys I worked with always called himself the why not guy, which would annoy a lot of people. But you almost that 5-year-old saying, well, why do we do it this way? Do we need to change the underlying policy? Where are the slowdowns? What can we automate? It's almost like your own performance review, right? What am I doing well? What should I stop? What should I do more of? And then maybe you add the piece of what do you automate? What do you get rid of? What do you cease? Right.
One of the things I notice is there's a lot of doing, but there's not sometimes a lot of vision. And I think if you don't have vision and you don't have the end game sort of laid out a little bit, or at least materialized in some way, it's going to be hard to reach that target. If you can't see it, you can't achieve it. Right. Like, so I think there's AI is another good example of that. People kind of running off. Oh, we're going to do AI. Well, maybe you should tackle, these things, use case by use case, find the real ROI on those, and then start to figure out and grow, right? Crawl, walk, run. But yeah, I think there's a lot of folks that are just doing and solving, but not necessarily visioning yet, and getting that in state prepared to be able to go off and chase it.
And it's a little bit of that chasing the next shiny thing. There's always going to be one.
Yeah.
Right? But you kind of have to have your basics and your good, solid foundation done. And it doesn't have to be sexy. It can be the little things that you just think. And then I think people often get lost where they're like, well, this is how we do it. And you're like, yeah, but wouldn't it be cool if you automated it or improved it?
Yeah.
And then you can watch the tickets decrease, like have that measurement. You might not even know where your measurement starts, but how do you know you're improving? Because you're going to set that baseline and move it forward. And then you get voice of the customer and what have you as well. But it can be baby steps for sure that can have huge impact.
I love that when you started talking about this, Maureen, you actually opened with probably one of the poster children for end-to-end mindset, which is onboarding, because there's such a tendency for folks to think, if I'm the payroll, practitioner, then I'm thinking end-to-end payroll, right? I'm not thinking, the employee end-to-end across payroll time and other things. And in onboarding, it's just quintessentially so many different stakeholders, oftentimes different systems in play. And there are a few suspect functional areas in HR that are like that. And so until you start thinking through the experience lens or through the end-to-end lens, you never get to those things. You're just tweaking.
Well, yeah, and it gets to root cause again, right? When we had disparate systems, everyone had their separate spreadsheet that could jimmy the system if they needed it to do. But once you realize the root cause of this downstream issue in payroll was because the rec was set up incorrectly or inconsistently with the output they wanted, and people are using new tools they don't know. So no finger pointing. No, it's an hour outcome view. And then the lights come on. Now that's heavy and it's a lot. And do I have to know everything? But if you know that it started wrong, it's never going to flow through right.
Yeah. And in that space as well, we also end up talking, if you're really talking end to end in an onboarding conversation, you're talking beyond the confines of HR as well. You're talking about the provisioning of credentials or equipment or keys, to the building. And so, where or how you change the aperture on your lens for an end-to-end mindset conversation, I think uncomfortably takes people beyond their own span of control or their own span of influence in an organization, right?
Yeah. I'm hoping that's where agents can bring all that together, right? And go and run those handoffs down to perfection, right? Without having to be like, oh, this is my job. This is my job.
Well,
and the
that's
handoffs
also
break.
the little bit of the, easier to point the finger at our friends in finance or IT.
Yeah.
And our house isn't
No.
necessarily stellar either, but that's where people experience it. I don't have my laptop on day one. I don't have the right access to systems. We can figure that out. It takes some work and it's not what it used to be, but you got to figure that stuff out.
Yeah.
Well, you might learn something.
Yeah. And I know, Maureen, you're, a big theme that I've heard you talk about in this whole space is just the idea of flipping the lens and looking at it as an employee would, right? I mean, that's kind of what HR has been attempting to do now since engagement was the buzzword and a bunch of other things were the buzzword, right? Experience and engagement. But how do you see people creating that muscle or that as a go-to?
Much like any sport, I guess, some people are natural athletes, and I think they start with the muscle. But then I think also making that change when you change all those underlying systems, you too are an employee. And all the stuff you used to do and know where to go and the funny button that didn't make sense, you don't know where it is anymore. So what we saw was lights coming on, whether it's manager self-service, employee self-service, or I'm going to go, open a rec one time a year. How am I going to know that? And it's making those tools super easy and accessible. So I don't come into the workout like ready to fail. Right. I think when you bring that versus if you're like, I can figure this out, they've made it easy for me. I don't think anyone comes to work and says, let me design a disjointed process that will frustrate people. Hopefully.
Amen to that.
Yeah. It's controls and compliance and human overthinking that bogs it down, or maybe some past practice.
I think even trying to do that though pushes people out of their comfort zone, right? And starts to break some functional silos and I know I know you probably have some thoughts about what bigger questions do you end up asking yourself or asking others when you start to really try to apply and mindset.
Yeah, and I think to Pete's point, some of it gets to you start on Earth. You have to pick up every rock, right? If you walk by one, that's where the gunk is, or the sacred cows, right? Or we've always done this. And when you start asking those questions of legal says, so then you go to legal, it can get tiresome, but then you grow believers along the way as well. So you kind of, as part of this change management part of the opportunity of the transformation, it was I got the opportunity to be that voice of the change. And I was like, oh, you kidding? This is the thing that everyone blames when it doesn't go well.
Yep.
But then it's really a political campaign and you're knocking on doors, shaking hands and bringing people along and making them think it's theirs and not in a manipulative way, just this will be better for you and this is how. And we never think eating our vegetables is good until it is.
Yeah, you do. I would agree. You there was a certain amount of in my transformation experience on the practitioner side, there was a certain amount of almost like roadshow selling that we needed to do as executives to go around and convince some of these business units that we were supporting that moving to a shared service center and getting aggressive with Sarbanes-Oxley requirements and other things that were changing in our world at the time. I'm dating myself. Were obviously very beneficial to their business, and that was a bit of you call it politics, but it's a bit of a selling. You kind of got to go out there and show them the what's in it for them, gain their buy-in, because without that, it's going to be really difficult to fly any air cover when things start to get difficult and frictioned, right? And there's going to be a little friction in any change. So I think it's having those allies that are like, yeah, we're going to champion your cause because it's good for all of us and let us go help you. Versus you going out there as the tip of the spear, trying to be the point man on the door opening, right? Like you don't want to do that. So
it's a build it and they will come, but they'll come with encourement. Yeah.
And they'll shoot you. They'll shoot you while you're there. You'll be the one they're hanging, no, but really there is a certain amount of diplomacy that goes into these things, especially in the enterprise that I've seen, that I think, I was privy to see very young and I appreciated it, right? Politicking, if you will.
Yeah, and it was great to have the support of the leadership team. You need it.
Yeah,
and they saw
it's a lot easier.
The risk of not, and then you through any of those kind of changes, whether the big transformational one of systems or changing processes, people have trust in what's been working, unless there's been a problem, right? Then everyone has a burning platform for change. But for that continuous improvement, efficiency, you got to have believers in the system that do. And I think those cross-functional non-accountable, not responsible, but believers that you create and advocates,
Yeah.
they're lasting forever, right?
Yeah, and I'll say this too, and I'd love your opinion. Like, it can't stop there, right? Like, it's not a one-time thing, and then, oh, okay, well, now we're done, and we never talk again. Like, you got to come right back with KPIs that start showing what we're doing and what we all agreed to. Because I think, and that was one thing I think was beneficial for our world, is that we gained a lot of credibility in those first 100 days, where we were able to come back with some metrics and start showing what we were putting together. And then it was like a totally different attitude towards us, even more so. Like, okay, how do we do more of this?
Yeah, and you need them.
Was the
Facts and
attitude.
data set you free, right? The anecdotal thing, the headline, the bad thing that happened that everyone heard about, was it one person or 100? It's still that
Right.
one person, still take it, but how do you correct? So facts and data set you free for sure. And then where I thought you were going to is after you get out of hypercare,
Yeah.
after you get out of the change, then it's the what's next. And sometimes
Yeah.
your warriors get burned out and you need to rotate them to something else, but not lose that advocacy and support. But it's always something. There's always another rock to pick up.
Oh, there's a relationship management element. Like you said, governance, right? It becomes a governance part that you have to relationship manage and keep the lines of communication open and make sure everybody's happy with what we're still doing, right?
Yeah. And listen, I think people underestimate this, but in order to make some of those big T transformations happen, leaders have to burn a lot of political capital. And so I can't tell you how many times, first of all, there are folks that love being in the throes of it and they love the chaos. And when it gets stable, they're like, okay, on to the next chaos bundle, right? But then there are places where legitimately you move mountains to make a big T transformation and you burn political capital, and the organization hits a place where it's better to put a fresh face in for the organization, not because you don't have a very effective leader, but because a face change is needed to take it to that next level, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen that, Maureen?
Leading a growing business, it's like building a plane while flying it. Team building, decision making, and scaling all at once. At CPO Playbook, we get it. That's why our podcast, ranked in the top 10% worldwide, tackles the toughest leadership challenges with insights to help you lead smarter and grow faster. Tune into the CPO Playbook podcast because leadership doesn't come with a manual, but we're pretty close.
Yeah, and it's interesting, particularly where some of these journeys can be long, 18 months, 20, like the team changes, the voices change, the face change naturally. And how do you bring those people along so that they know the whys, the whats, and wherefores, and where we're going? And then you're right. Sometimes the person needs to step back and change, do something totally different, come back again. And sometimes to your point, it can be a job well done, but then a what's next. And for those of us who are a little bit of junkies who like to kind of fill that gray space and always break a couple things to fix them real quick, there's always that opportunity, right? But it can't then become Julie's project or Pete's project. That's because then it's like, oh, here comes Pete again. But to your point on the allyship, Pete, when your friends in finance need something, they then know who to go to, right? I mean, whether that's vendor and client, it's a small world and we need each other. So let's figure out where those linkages are when you need to make that call. And I think these kind of opportunities do that.
Well, I love the conversation about aligning people, which has to happen not only at the top, right, and whoever's breaking the eggs and trying to make the omelets, but also the roles that are changing because it's going to be a brave new world at the end. The other thing that I think would be interesting conversation is sometimes we have to align our policies as well when we think about end-to-end mindset. So you're trying to make things better and look through a different lens, and you run just head smack into policies, or it can be union regulations, right? Like things that are really hard to change. You can't change those overnight. What have you found there, Maureen, just in that space?
Yeah, and it's fascinating. And a lot of the policies in HR are HR policies that we are the sentinel for the business, et cetera, and risk mitigation. But What I learned a lot, because if you keep asking why or tell me more, you learn a lot more. And sometimes you learn people don't know why they're there, but that's the way we've always done it, keeps people away enough that
Yeah.
oh, yikes,
Yeah.
it's not working.
It's comfortable too, by the way.
Yes.
It's comfortable.
It is comfortable. And then what you also realize is sometimes you've got some saboteurs out there that might be nodding yes, but really, and at first I'm like, ooh, they're not on board. And they've got to come along in their time. Some will never. But I realize that so much of that is more just fear about what's my job going to be? What risk am I taking? And if you can kind of put the lid on those, they'll bring along, and then often they're your biggest believers again. But the policies were amazing. Or you also realize, which is also a risk, how many policies are sitting out in our policy referral, click here, deep dive into something that are no longer valid. Yet, should there be a lawsuit or a question, we're not always great at culling out and coming up with our most current.
Or are tribal, right? And so there's this collection of tribal practices that have become very policy like, that that you can step or trip all over, and they're not even a policy, they're not even a thing. It's just the way it's done, and those things need to change. I also find those are super tied to the culture as well. So when you start tripping over policies and practices and those sorts of things, you are tampering with, somebody's cheese, getting ready to move some cheese around.
And sometimes the culture's changed without those changing. The other is you can also have, much like CVS, you have quite diverse businesses within that have different business requirements. Now, can employers often specialize themselves into custom everything paralysis? Absolutely. But there are clearly different diverse needs for kind of a corporate shared service environment versus a retail store. And that's okay. But to make that, being that challenger and challenging the status quo is a challenge.
Effective challenge.
How about, much to do is made, and sometimes the central starting point is looking from a technology lens, right? People are trying to, move into something that brings more automation. Now AI, everybody's looking at that from a technology lever. But aligning systems can also lead you to look exclusively at the automated end to end, and not the broader end to end that incorporates all those things that aren't part of automation. Any thoughts about that? And the pitfalls, the risks, or things to navigate so that you don't just take a technology end to end lens.
And it isn't, right? And so much is that one of our biggest learnings is the communication and tools and leveraging things that existing. Everything doesn't have to be custom. And then you did the best you could, and you learned along the way. And oh my gosh, we didn't need to have this bulky stuff. We needed it trimmer. And that's okay. You didn't fail. You succeeded. We moved the needle. Now we got to move it again. Right. And we know more. Automation's interesting because that's kind of magical behind the scenes. But you need to have your upfront clear to people to know, if you push this button, do you know this is going to happen? And we had a fair amount of that, those surprises along the way. But I think, again, it goes, I guess, back to people processing technology, right? It's one of the three.
Hey, can I ask a question? This is something that always kind of bothered me. Julie, maybe you've seen this a lot. As a consultant in my consulting days, especially, it's always maybe not always, but a lot of times in the enterprise, right? And I think, I know just from memory, CVS has made some pretty big acquisitions in the last, Signify Health and some others. What I always thought was interesting is when a bigger fish was swallowing a smaller fish, it was almost like all the processes from the smaller fish were just less dominant, right? And I always would look at things at some of these, I've worked on many M&A, and I've looked at some and I used to think well, wait a minute, the way they're doing this is, that system's way better and what they're doing is way better. Why can't we just do what they're doing? But it's oh no, we've got the thing over here and everybody's got to conform. How do you balance taking the best of IP, even if that means back office IP, from another organization and integrating it into the bigger fish? And maybe that's a podcast, I don't know, but you know what I mean? That always bothered me, that sometimes I felt like the daddy, the bigger fish was always sort of playing the wild card on the smaller guy when there was probably something better there.
Probably. And some of it, I think, is that lift and shift because I said, so that's why. And it's coming over and it's what we know and it's how we run our business. That is if you have a like, perhaps. However, I think there's also that lens, Pete, that if everyone was going to start with this clean slate, they wouldn't start with the technology, the processes. They would design it differently. And sometimes you've got the best of both worlds would be to cherry pick both. Now, can the one of the issues that we have CVS was, can the smaller technology handle the whale? And from a pressure testing, et cetera. But to be able to have that conversation of like, oh, geez, we never got it. We've had this for 20 years because it was never the right time, money, business time going on or investment to make, but they've got what we want. Let's do that. To me, that's a very strategic, intentional, and positive thing to do, but I think it's fairly rare.
Yeah, there's so many complexities and variables that go into that, right? I mean, you can't just like break procurement contracts and completely change processes around a smaller thing. But I just think there's a lot of opportunity to learn from some of these, organizations that you're buying that have practices that might be learned from.
It's a lot funner to apply it in the divestiture scenario, right? Because somebody is going to start with a clean slate or have an opportunity usually to work with a clean slate. And like most people that I know kind of want to be the clean slate people because you get to slough off of things that maybe, didn't pan out the way you thought. And yes, there's some pressure to build it, to do something new, but there are restructuring budgets and other things. And so you get to think with that, more of a whiteboard mentality when you're going the other way around, and the M&A is just a little bit more of.
That's a great point. That's a great
point.
What's
the efficiency play here, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of great stories out there from the HR tech and managed service providers for how they, were be able to be agile and flexible for companies to do exactly that, invent their future forward process in their new world once they divested. So it is a little bit of an opportunity to hit reset, I think.
Yeah. Hey, I don't want to leave some of this conversation without just spending a little bit of time, Maureen, on some of the impacts or the benefits and the outcomes that, are positive that you can get from end-to-end thinking and working and just structuring what you're doing in an end-to-end mindset. What would you share with us in that space?
Yeah, it's probably going to sound like too much of a softball question, but I really loved and got really jazzed up. Employees are great at sharing feedback, whether you want to hear it or not, and it is a gift. But when they were like, wow, that was easy, or I didn't know what system I was in and it didn't matter. Like it's those things where, or I know this probably would never happen to anybody, when you can literally push a report button and get headcount. How much headcount do we have today? And have that number today. Some of them can be a very foundational thing and the same answer twice. So some of those are very fine, the things that you could never do before. And then you look at the folks that were doing those roles or pulling the reports together and you're like, now you get to go do something else. And we still need you. You're still valuable. We love your institutional knowledge. You can make other things run better too. Apply that forward. So a lot of that was the employee satisfaction, manager satisfaction, reportability. And sometimes you forget what you've done without. And you're like, oh my gosh, I could do that. So even having the time and the mind share to think about what do I want my data and analytics reporting to look like? Because before I was doing it, with some duct tape and twigs and making it happen. But now I can do this and now I can do the analytics stuff and I can do the more strategic stuff. And it's true. It's not HR textbook.
Yeah.
Isn't it the flip side of the fear, right? When folks are going into these big transformation bits, there's a lot of trepidation about what happens to me. Is my job gone? And then it's so fun to hear you say, as a key outcome on the flip side is, wow, like, that I'm satisfied, like getting satisfaction. I'm not doing stupid stuff, right? Hopefully, I'm doing
I always wanted
something
to
different,
this,
which
and now
may become stupid in the next challenge itself.
Yeah.
But
I was just thinking. I know this is kind of off subject a little bit, but kind of on subject. We were just talking about like employee feedback, and in the spirit of all the great feedback tools we have out there, right? All the employee engagement, listening, pulses, all that. What if we actually had like a Yelp? Right, where you could where they had to publicly put like finances ratings, like, they're cranky and slow over in finance and HR, you know what I mean? Like if we had Yelp reviews where people could like in the organization could publicly see how you perform towards the other, as a customer, to the other departments, I think it would be very interesting. A lot of shaming, you know what I mean?
You know what else? I'm gonna get a big "I told you so" too from my colleague Dave Polishek, because you started that whole comment, Maureen, with the voice of the customer, right? Like what people are sharing about what is broken or what doesn't work is the most interesting and valuable information you could possibly hear along the journey. And yet, I'm telling you, when I scope, dozens and dozens of projects to help assess and figure out transformation moving forward every year. And the voice of the customer bit, which takes, it's a skill, and it takes getting out there and being willing to open up and hear that feedback, is one of the first things that gets cut.
We love to hear our accolades, and I'm one of the crazy people that like to hear the negatives. I just was on a different project at a different employer, and I said the people had the verbatims and they had them on the PowerPoint slide, and I said, well, what were the negative ones? And they're like, oh, I didn't read those. I'm like, therein lies the magic. Like that's where where your next opportunity is, and where do you focus next or what have you. But when the person's like, oh, I didn't want to look at the negatives, I'm like, those are your gems, right?
The user has the answer, right? And I think companies need to do more work with triangulating or collating their employee experience data with their customer experience data, because obviously we know one drives the other. And I think there are opportunities to learn from both of those. And you're right, the negative is where you're going to learn. It's not in the positive, hey, everything's great. It's when the plane's crashing that you're gonna find out whether your systems work.
Yeah, and we so often think, you reminded me of, we want a consumer-esque experience in HR.
Yeah.
And when you are a consumer retailer and a lot of your things are automated and easy, people say, well, if we can do this for our customers, why can't we do this for ourselves? And what a great way to hold that mirror up and hold you true to your values, mission, expectations of your customer.
Yeah. The employees have the answer, too, to why the customers are happy or not.
It's fantastic.
They can even shed light on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think we shouldn't really expect to be insulated from that, right? I mean, it's a little bit of a defensive posture to say, I want to highlight. There's a shared services leader I've met under the planet that doesn't want to tell me how great their shared services is and how it's so much better than somebody else could do shared services, right? It's just a part of
shared service so hard.
We do so damn hard.
Yeah.
And so yes, they're doing great things and they should be very proud of that. But when you stake your identity on that and, assume that you have to do it in order to persevere and to justify your existence better than, X could do it, that does leave you a little bit exposed to not hearing all of these things that could, go wrong, whether it's fragmented systems and data or, misaligned metrics. And I mean, like, these are realities. It takes years to flush these things out. There's always opportunity there.
It's that question of like, what does winning look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does winning mean, really?
You're spot on. And even if you have the metrics and you do our favorite red, yellow, green, because that solves everything too. And people are like, yeah, all the numbers are green, but it doesn't feel green. Okay, then we need to elevate.
Yeah. I see green, but feel red.
Yeah. Then you get into shades of Grello. Yeah.
And isn't this what we've been talking about every time we talk about elevating HR or elevating payroll, right? The whole idea is you do something and then you put some metrics or get some visibility into the impact at, how you're doing. And then you find a way to bring that forward in a context that's valuable to the broader organization. And that's really what we've been talking about. Building your own table and finding a seat at the table is, this thing that's just in our DNA. We're doing it all the time. We just don't necessarily look at it that way, right?
Yeah. I feel like in a way, I'm starting to think maybe it's less about getting a seat, making a table or finding a table or whatever, and more about just shaping a POV that then will get you invited to whatever the table is, whatever, however you define that, right? I mean, I think a lot of practitioners, especially in payroll, just lack a point of view and a vision and an end state where they're just doing. Back to what I was saying earlier, there's just a lot of doing, which is very noble, but it's not going to transform you. And I think that's maybe shaping that POV, point of view, a perspective, an opinion based on data, and match that with a vision, and then watch maybe a roadmap and a budget will come with that, right?
Or you get invited to the party, right? You were
you get invited to the party. Yeah.
The last acquisition or the last divestiture not a point.
Absent a point of view, you're kind of absent value in that, having a voice, right? And I think if you've got that point of view that's supported by data, you're going to have a much different experience.
And you're just not handed the, now go implement what we just messed up.
Yeah.
So maybe building your end-to-end mindset experience is your ticket to being the party girl or the party guy in all the fun, exciting HR transformation circles.
No, and sometimes I'll say, why am I...
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm like, no, why am I here? And they're like, because you just bring them.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, But Pete, to your point, own them. You can contribute to them without owning.
Well, even the ones you're kind of drafted into or voluntold to be a part of, I mean, you could still make put your stamp, because it's your chance to have a vote as to what the next wave of doing is. So don't look over those, right? I mean, I've been a part of a lot of those myself, and I didn't love it, but I was like, hey, I don't want to shirk this off because it affects me,
Yep, it's filling that gray space. Love it.
Yeah.
So, hey, I know we're going to wrap shortly, and Pete will end with the usual what's up and where do we find you. But did we miss anything that you really had top of mind? We kind of went all over the place. There's a lot of places to go with the idea of the end-to-end mindset. Is there anything that that we didn't ask you that we should have asked you that you really wanted? That you wanted to make sure that we talked about?
Yeah, and I think the onboarding, I appreciate the question. I think the onboarding is just the fantastic anchor for all of it, but it's not just that, right? It's talent, it's recruit. You can size it up, size it down, but just size it. It's really fun. Don't be afraid. Don't run with scissors either, but be thoughtful, and you'd be amazed at the impact you can have of just having that not only end to end, but employee or the user end, and not the administrator's end. It's a lens flip, but it's really pretty cool and impactful.
Agreed. I love it. This is good stuff. I think we could make this much longer episode. I got a few more questions actually, but Maureen, how do we get in touch with you? Like, where can folks find you? And we'll share those links for you.
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best way. I'm happy to connect with people in that way and be inspired by others for sure.
Likewise. Excellent. Well, we appreciate you coming on.
Same.
And Julie, anything else?
No, I don't think so. I'm always excited to spend time chatting with Maureen. We had a chance recently in March to spend some time together, and I know we'll get many more chances over the years. I would just encourage folks to know she's an amazing resource, has gone through a lot of different trials and tribulations and in end-to-end journeys and in HR. So thank you, Maureen, for spending time with us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Maureen. These are great conversations. I think there needs to be a lot of this right now as people are trying to digest all that's going on, all the change, the opportunity with AI. I mean, there's just so much. I think a lot of it is sitting down and just thinking through it with your peers and kind of applying it to the moment, right? And saying, how do we make it work for us? So I love it. Well, thank you so much, Maureen. And we'd love to have you back anytime. And obviously, we'll see everyone very, very soon.